Welcome to today's discussion on bridging the gap in rare diseases from discovery to access in India, organized by Voice of Healthcare and supported by Akums. Rare diseases affect millions of families, yet most remain unseen, underdiagnosed, underreported, and often unsupported. Our objective today is to bring together multiple perspectives to understand where the gap really lies, whether it's in awareness, diagnostics, policy, patient support, or access to affordable therapies. We are privileged to have thus experts from advocacy, clinical practice, research, and industry, each bringing a distinct lens to this complex ecosystem. Over the next 1 hour, we'll explore how India can strengthen early diagnosis, build reliable data framework, and create more actionable patient-centric policies. Most importantly, we'll examine how innovation and India's growing CDMO capabilities can shift the landscape, making rare disease solutions more accessible, affordable, and localized. Join me in welcoming our panelists for today's discussion, Ms. Sangeeta Barde, co-founder
Hello.
and director, Organization for Rare Diseases India. Welcome, Sangeeta.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody.
Dr. Charu Gautam, Senior Medical Director, Medical Sciences and Strategy, Asia Pacific, IQVIA. Welcome, Dr. Charu.
Thank you, Dr. Manisha. Hello, everyone.
Dr. Deepa Bhat, Genetic Counselor, Professor, Department of Anatomy, GSS Medical College and Hospital, Mysore. Welcome, Dr. Deepa.
Namaste. Hello, everyone.
And Ms. Arushi Jain, Director, Akums Drugs and Pharmaceuticals. Welcome, Ms. Arushi.
Namaste, hello everyone. Happy to be amongst these esteemed panelists.
Right. So I have with me Ms. Sangeeta. So Ms. Sangeeta, can you tell me that rare diseases often remain invisible because they are underdiagnosed and they are underreported as well? How do we begin to understand the true burden in India and what holds us back from better awareness?
Okay. Once again, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for attending this particular webinar, which is something which is taking the cause forward on rare diseases. And I must thank VOH for it, and at the same time, Akums, who is strengthening the cause forward, and also inviting me to be the part of this seminar and be at the table. I think it's a very pertinent and important question to begin with when it comes to understanding rare diseases and where the gaps are. I think as we talk about it, the rare diseases are rare in nature. That is because you find a very small population suffering from respective rare diseases, and that is something which is not very widely seen or identified very easily at various level. And genuinely, I must say that look, while the name is called, it is called rare diseases, but they are really not rare. There are almost 60 to 90 million patients which are there in India. 70 to 90 million patients were there in India who could be suffering from rare diseases, but we really don't know where those many of those patients where they are. The issues are with genuine level of low awareness among people itself, the general population. Because what happens is that you typically find the rare diseases in the very early part of a child's life. Almost 70 to 80% of the rare diseases are found in children. And what happens is most of the times when you see the symptoms, they look similar to some other symptoms of some other diseases, and which sometimes could be very common in nature. Either it could be a drooping head or it could be developmental delays and things like that. So typically, people really do not have the wherewithal at that point in time to think about it, saying that this could be rare in nature. And therefore, they end up going to multiple doctors. And when they end up going to multiple doctors, the issue there is that they move from one doctor to another doctor who also have got comparatively, lesser knowledge about these kind of symptoms and coming and having rare diseases at the top of mind as a matter of recall. And therefore, these kind of patients go underreported. They just don't get into the data, don't get into any reporting scheme. So that is one of the reasons, the main reason. talking about that rare disease underdiagnosed and therefore underreported, and therefore you really don't get to see the exact burden of the rare disease. The next one is that when I talk about a data framework, I'm saying that do we have really a data framework which is interoperative data framework, or is there a national registry? Yes, there is a national registry, but is it interconnected with the center of excellences? Is it interconnected with the private hospitals? Is it interconnected at the primary level? Unfortunately and sadly, it is not, and therefore people who either don't get into the stream itself, or those who get, they all remain in the silos. The minute you do have the silos, you really do not, everything could get underreported or everything can go underdiagnosed. So that is one of the biggest challenge that India suffers, that we do not have an interoperating national data registry when it comes to the rare diseases. I also see another problem, when it comes to, because it has been 13 years that I've been associated with the rare diseases, and with very well respected people, doctors who are there in the field of rare genetic disorders, diagnosing, handling patients, supporting them, really taking care of them. But at a particular level, say, because it is very multifactorial, orthopedists, rheumatologists, neurologists, or many other faculties of doctors, population in the primary or in the secondary areas could lack, maybe lacking the knowledge on the rare diseases. Also because it's not the part of the curriculum. It's not taught in the curricula. So that is one of the reasons where the knowledge gap could be existing at the primary and secondary level, which also means that look, in the hinterlands of India, when the patient goes to the doctor, he or she doesn't get diagnosed. She moves from one doctor to another doctor. So when there is no diagnosis, there is underdiagnosis, there is no reporting, at the end of the day, you don't see the burden. So that's the second very important part. And the very other important part which I feel is that, okay, while in 2025 in WHO Assembly, rare diseases were documented as the public health priority, and India is a signatory to this particular document. It simply means that, look, one has to create a decibel level in terms of the awareness of the rare diseases here in India, and which is what I find that is lacking again from the policymakers or the government, to an extent that one needs to do it. Because this needs a mass scale awareness, like any nutrition related issue, like any reproductive health related issues. And that is something which I personally believe that, look, when organizations like us who are creating awareness, when we are supported by the ministries, by the policies, I think a lot of difference can happen in terms of really reaching the nook, hole, and corner of this country to create awareness. So what happens is that, in short, we are not gathering the data, we lack the knowledge, and we don't have public awareness. So these three factors really lead to underreporting when it comes to rare diseases. And that simply means we are not able to gauge the burden of the rare diseases. So, so that's where I believe that is a big
Right.
challenge is. So we really need to have interoperable systems, things like that. So it's a very multifaceted problem when it comes to, not being able to gauge the burden. So we really need to
Right.
start looking at how do we create registry, how do we create awareness, things like that. Yeah,
Right. I
that's
also
what.
believe that we need an interconnected ecosystem, and then only we can, create the awareness and also, make the diagnosis and get it reported when it is required. And once the diagnosis is made, then only we can have the affordable and accessible treatments available. Because once the diagnosis is done, not done, nothing can be done. So, Dr. Charu, for many families, diagnosis takes years. What barriers, whether it's limited to, access to genetic testing, lack of awareness, or infrastructure gap, make early detection such a challenge?
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Manisha. I think Sangeeta has really set the tone for the discussion, and this, as rightly said, the field of rare diseases is very complex and heterogeneous. Um, Early diagnosis is extremely challenging due to, and it's multifactorial, including the lack of awareness, not only among the patients or the parents, the general public, but also among the primary care physicians whom they would first approach with the patient. and the lack of adequate screening and diagnostic facilities. So though we call them as rare, but there are, as we say, there are about 7,000 rare diseases which take on an average 5 to 7 years for diagnosis. So when the patient first presents, it would take up to 5 to 7 years before a proper diagnosis is made. And the patients would have visited several healthcare professionals, on an average, again, 7 to 8 healthcare professionals before the diagnosis is made. So look at the journey of the patients. They may not even know that they are suffering from a rare disease for a long time. And the primary reason is a lack of awareness in the general public, in the parents, and in the healthcare professionals, especially the primary healthcare professionals, as they have little exposure to rare diseases because of the low prevalence. And also, they may not have seen these patients in their training, because being rare, not all hospitals would have these kind of patients. So when, like, I have been a medical resident, I mean, I have never got a chance to see a rare disease patient in my college in those days. So that kind of exposure is not there for the healthcare professionals. And so when they are diagnosed, this is like, not on their first diagnosis that they would do. And again, as Sangeeta mentioned, the rare disease is frequently present with very vague or multi-system symptoms. So they overlap with common disorders, making it hard to identify the underlying rare condition. The symptoms often mimic common conditions, leading to misdiagnosis or a delayed diagnosis. Again, there's a lack of standardized diagnostic guidelines. So there are no standardized protocols for rare diseases, or how they should have the clear pathways for testing, for referrals, etc. And these patients go to multiple specialists, because many times the rare disease involves multiple systems. It could be neurology, it could be endocrine, it could be genetics, it could be gastrointestinal. So because of the multiple things, the health records are also very complex and fragmented. So the data is scattered, and therefore lack of electronic health records in India, we may not have a proper history of what the patient has, what tests have they undergone, what is the current situation, what the past tests they have done. So there is a fragmentation of the medical records. And when finally, through screening, if they are identified, there is a limited access to specialized testing. So if you look at genetic or molecular testing labs, they are not very frequently seen, especially in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. So those tests required for confirmation may not be widely available. And after preliminary screening tests, further testing could be required using complex tests, next generation sequencing based tests, or chromosomal microarrays. And these are quite expensive and time consuming process. And there could also be interpretation issues of these tests, counseling at all centers. So to have the trained manpower, trained professionals who would, read through these tests and report them accurately is also something which we need to build. Um, Other than that, I think it's also the geographic and economic barriers that lead to a delayed diagnosis. So those living in rural areas, or those living in tier 2, tier 3, the transportation of these patients to the testing sites, or to visit to the tertiary care centers or the center of excellence, as we now have, could be also a limiting factor for early diagnosis. So to sum up, it could be, it is a lack of awareness, economic barriers, geographic barriers, insufficient testing facilities or access to these testing facilities. That could be the cause for a delayed diagnosis.
Right, right. So I think we have to build more infrastructure for more genetic and molecular testing, because that is what is required to confirm that it's a rare disease. Otherwise, the symptoms are so vague, as you have rightly mentioned, Dr. Charu, that a clinician or a primary healthcare worker may not be diagnosing the rare disease in the first go. Dr. Deepa, India's scientific community has deep expertise in genetic and molecular biology. How can this strength be better linked with everyday clinical practice to ensure faster and more accurate diagnosis?
Yeah, thank you. I would say, I'm being a proud Indian. India is not at all dearth with talents. So we have everything, whether it's a laboratory setup or genomic strength or world class researchers or scientists, everything is there. But I feel that personally, because I have worked in the Rare Disease Care Coordination Center, I have worked in the field for a sickle cell research, being a part of ICMR task force, and I have sat in the corporate setup and also in the research lab. We have a genomic lab too. But sitting with all different cadres, I have felt that I think India still lacks that alignment. So the alignment, like, and the biggest challenge, what I feel is the policies are made by the people who are sitting in 20-degree, who will be driving the policies which is applicable at 40-degree. So they have never reached 40-degree to understand what is required. It is not just getting policies. Is it really implementable? Is it adaptable? Is it feasible? So many components have to be thought of. And along with that, this particular gap creates lot of things which makes it unreachable to the community which really needs it. This is what I feel is the biggest challenge in India. Though we have in isolated pockets, this create a lot of talent. This vacuum results that everybody's effort will not ultimately reach the needy. We have all the prior experts have given different components, but are we connecting all these dots? Is it happening? Second thing is, I'm really happy that NPRD has brought so many things, but how long? We need so many patients. I have more than so many patients who are waiting for the enzyme replacement therapy. They're unable to get it because so many, though we fancy terms 50 lakh is written there in NPRD. How many of them have got the 50 lakh? It is the voice of the parents who really could gather the strength to get it, have really got obtained this 50 lakh. Many of them lost hope and have gone back home thinking that this life is gone and will plan the next baby, kind of. This is a current scenario which we are facing. So we need to shift. What I feel is we really need to shift, let me grow rather than let us work for the disease concept. Let's work for this disease. If there is this shift, for which I feel that collaboration is really essential. So I feel three or four things. The first is government should take this as a priority. I working with sickle cell disease before sickle cell mission and after sickle cell mission. I've realized once the mission came, everybody were on toes. So it was a priority for everybody. Everything aligned. It's like bogie entered a proper track, and all the engine entered the track, and bogies were there together. So I think we have 7,000 diseases. I don't know how far the programs are going to cater each one of them. So this is one thing, and we should build an ecosystem, not the island. The communities, the researchers, the policymakers, the doctors, everybody should complement each other, blind spot and contribute. The next important thing is we should have a national pathway. But what I felt working with the national, now the ICMR has created an NHRP, National Health Priority Research. All this is helping to bring a common concept across multicentric sites. But it's for one disease? Why not it is for all the rare diseases? So, and another thing is, it is always one more is, we really, because I'm from a private institute, I always feel there should be a proper mechanism or even a governance for a public private partnership. India works majority on private sector, and government still exist. It is not that we do not respect them, but there should be some policy where inclusion of it is happening, but the momentum is so slow that we are lagging behind compared to other countries. This is really very important, which I feel. And also translating, we speak lot of conferences, bench to bedside. It has become a slogan, but it is not still embedded into the system. This is what I may be more frank, but this is the reality when we sit in the counseling clinic and listen to. Even just now, I heard a lady crying that first child is affected. It took her 5 years to get a cochlear implant. Now she is pregnant and she has reached a doctor in a tier 3 city that she has gone immediately after getting pregnant. Will my next baby be affected? Because she was consanguineous married. But she was told just karyotyping was done and she was told everything is normal, go. Now she comes with anomaly scan at 24th week with both ventricles very much enlarged. I really feel sad for her because she has gone herself with a very lower level of education asking the doctor, but doctor himself has not given her a proper direction. I feel health education at the specialist level is also very much essential. So not only research, I think, forget about research, we are at a stage where health education and awareness at different subspecialties itself is very much lacking. So yeah, this is what we need to work on so that rare diseases becomes first in the brain. Rare, it is, I feel rare diseases are no more rare. It's only commonly the symptoms are so common that we tend to miss them, and they go lot many consultants before it get diagnosed. So before research, let's research on how to educate. This is what I feel, and bring it as a national policy.
Right, right. I think this is a very good message from a researcher that we should research how to implement the policies, because this is what is required to, build the whole ecosystem. So, Ms. Arushi, as global CDMO continue to accelerate the journey molecule to market, an important question arises that how can India's CDMO expand its momentum even further to bring high quality, affordable, often drugs to patients who need them the most, and to do so faster than ever before?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Manisha. So as we've already established that India has a huge, population base of patients with rare disease, about 70 million, because the population of India is so huge. So since the patient base is huge, CDMOs like us and pharmaceutical companies can prioritize high impact, non patent blocked orphan APIs and start working on them as first steps. We can also collaborate with global, pharma manufacturing companies, innovators who have developed such cures for tech transfers and then develop them locally at a much more lower cost in India, suited to the India's environment. India is a different climate as compared to, let's say, a Europe, right? So the products here need to be cold chain light. They need to be stable at higher temperatures, also, as an example. So we also need to ensure that the drugs that we are working on are developed as per the Indian climatic, and storage conditions, which are practical and along with being at a lower and affordable cost so that the accessibility is ensured. Thirdly, I think it's very important to also partner with the Center of Excellences, clinicians, and patient NGOs to co-develop and understand and better develop the drugs which are relevant. Um, Lastly, as Dr. Deepa highlighted, it's we need to have a framework for public and private partnership, because being on the private side, we understand that even if we develop a drug, the question of the distribution, accessibility, and awareness to the patient level is still a question for us, right? So, which we do not have a clear answer of, or clear approach from the government. We have developed a few drugs for rare diseases in the past, and even though we are proud to say that that drug is patented, it is suited to India's climate, but has it truly reached the patient? No. So, the issue of awareness and accessibility also needs to be addressed through the policy.
Right. I think India's temperature, weather conditions, that has to be taken into consideration when we are thinking about a molecule or APIs to be, used for making these orphan drugs available to Indian community. Because the problem is that the core lies in the rural areas, and they don't have access to diagnosis or to the treatment. And of course, with the policy, we have to reach there. So, Ms. Sangeeta, could a national registry or a connected research clinical ecosystem finally help us build reliable data and shorten the diagnosis or disease for patients?
Indeed, I certainly believe so because that's the starting point, according to me, the national registry. Because, in India, one of the challenges that we have is that our data sits in many, many places and we have pockets of data. It's not just about the rare diseases. You go do it for any other conditions, any other diseases, you will find that India doesn't have a consolidated data anywhere. It's very important for national registry for the rare diseases for a very reason is because of the kind of issues that we face with the patients who are not able to get diagnosed at an early stage. And that is something which is the holy grail of treating a patient if there is a treatment. And if that is the case, then national registry becomes really very, very essential starting point for the rare diseases so that you consolidate all the data. Today we have 15 center of excellences in India. There are existing ones, the 10 center started much earlier. They could have a lot of data themselves. There could be some data which could be sitting in the laboratories. So there is everywhere there is some data, and if we decide that we put this data together and populate it together, just imagine the amount of learning that one would have in terms of what kind of trend, what kind of patterns, what kind of issues which are coming up, which can help clinicians to diagnose the disease much faster and much earlier. I think that's one of the very, very essential and very big outcome when it comes to pulling the data together and bringing it once for all at one particular point. Even if we say that, look, 100% is not possible, which everyone knows, but can at least 50 to 70% be the
True.
possibility? Somewhere there has to be a starting point on the national registry and having that data pooling, which can help us do that. So, minute the clinicians start seeing the pattern, they will also start being more aware of the diseases of various conditions, and they would take the right, it would be a red flag. They would take the right decision. They would either refer it to somebody, they would refer it to the specialist, and the child would get diagnosed sooner and faster. And if there is a treatment, the child will go on a treatment, provided the NPRD supports it. The referral pathways, of course, would become much more easier. That's what I said, because if there are early signs and symptoms, red flags are being put up there, the patient would go to the right doctors and the pathway will become much clearer. Otherwise, which is like shopping from one doctor to another doctor to another doctor to move another doctor, and 7 years have passed. And the child has lost very, very critical time of his or her life. So that's where I feel that we always believed, as Vardia is saying, that how do you do these kind of things? And that's where the helpline that we started, we said, okay, is that one of the opportunity where we can bring patients sooner and direct them to the right doctors? So that's one area. So the registry is important. This will also give rise to the good research. Because what happens is that, again, it's a matter of saying that, look, do I have insights on a particular disease? And if I have an insight and patterns on particular diseases, can I do something about it? Can I find some therapies? Can I find some different kind of way of managing the disease? And all of that put together. And that is something which I feel that, look, all these 2 to 3 things are possible once you have the registry in place. You can connect all of them. You have patient organizations who understands patients, their families very well. They understand the symptoms very well. They can be the part of this whole thing. You have registry on one side, you have patterns on the other side. Imagine the industry is supported with all of these data. They would probably do the much better, insight into the disease and therefore the researchers. Telemedicine can play a very interesting role there at that time also, when you pool the data together. So many things are there. Registry can enable all of these things put together and can really give that kind of, speed up the whole process of diagnosis is what I strongly believe. And we have to do something about it sooner than later.
Yes. So I think not only do we need the genetic and molecular lab testing, we do need the patterns, we do need that how a particular patient behaves and how the symptoms, they appear. For that, we definitely need a national disease registry. So, Dr. Charu, India's national policy for rare diseases was a significant milestone. But what are we learning about its on-ground impact, and how can it become more actionable for patients and caregivers?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something which has been touched upon earlier in our discussion also, that we do have a policy. And I think that itself is a good milestone, because the first time we had a policy was in 2017. And though this was framed with the best intent, there were implementation challenges and gaps which were identified immediately. And within a year, there was a new committee in 2018 set up to look at it and see how we can make it more practical to implement, considering the cost effectiveness of supporting health interventions for the limited resource situation. So, making it more feasible and practical. And in 2021, we had the NPRT, which is now in force. And this brought in a good framework for one is categorizing the rare diseases, something, what into group 1, 2, 3, into what could be treatable. So when we're talking of rare disease, we all know that, on this platform, that there are only 10% of which, 5 to 10, which have actually a treatment, and the remaining are being managed by symptomatic treatment. So there are not adequate approved treatments for these rare diseases. So, categorizing the rare disease based on the availability of treatment, the cost effectiveness of treatment, on where to put in the resources was done, designating centers of excellence. So, it started with 8, and now we have 15 centers of excellence. And the Nidan Kendras, or the mentoring centers, to, provide the patient pathways and channelizing the patients from different centers. Also, the policy to extend financial support of up to 50 lakhs per patient, but as um, uh, we heard that, it is not reaching the patients due to multiple reasons. There is even state to state difference. It's uneven. Implementation is uneven across states. The funding has remained unpredictable, and the clinical pathways are also fragmented, and patients are facing treatment interruptions sometimes, so which is really disappointing. First to get the funds, then to have interruptions. Sometimes they start the treatment, and then the second time they do not receive it, so there is an interrupted treatment. And these are the challenges that the patients face, which leads to, unnecessary anxiety and stress among the caregivers. And imagine, their journey where they have to visit the sites from far off, and go back without receiving the treatment or the funds. So one is, yes, there has been an underutilization of the funds that has been granted by the government. So one report said that about 70% of funding at the Center of Excellence remains unspent. And the laboratory setups, the transportation support for patients, and operational funding mechanisms are unimplemented. So, though the policy is in place, how it can be implemented is something which we still need to figure out, or have a proper standard operating procedure at each of the centers. So, to be having a uniform implementation of the policy, and identify the beneficiaries. The registry is a very good starting point, but as we see, the number of patients registered are still not as we would expect in a country like India, where we would have large number of patients. And that means that even now the beneficiaries are not being registered onto the national registry of for rare diseases. So I think to make it more actionable for patients and caregivers is there should be a proper fund utilization by having audit the utilization, streamlining the grant processes, and ensure that the funds are translating to care. Enhance the infrastructure and logistics. Secondly, that is systematically improve the patient transport reimbursements, so that when they are coming from the rural and semi-urban areas, they are not burdened by that. And when we're talking of the 50 lakhs, we must also remember that the cost of these therapies is very high. For some diseases, this may not even cover the cost of the drug therapy. And then there are other therapies that they may need a wheelchair, they may need physiotherapies, they may need different kinds of prosthetics. So those are other treatments. Some need surgeries, which we are not even considering when we are talking about their therapy. So the economic burden is huge, and the earlier we reach out to them, the more we can prevent these complications. So it's very important that we identify patients early, and we provide them the funds in the correct time, so that the long term impact can be seen with the policies that we have put in place.
Right. Rightly said, Dr. Charu, that there is a huge financial burden, and along with that, definitely there is emotional and logistical struggle as well for the families. So, Dr. Deepa, what can be done to lighten this burden, especially in terms of support, awareness, and access to treatment?
Yeah, coming to emotional, what I feel as a genetic counselor is it is not the disease which is a burden, it is lack of awareness, confusion, struggle related to. Many times sitting in the counseling clinic, we feel that once they are exactly, we have arrived at the diagnosis itself, relieves lot of stress which the family goes through. I feel emotionally coming to the final conclusion, this is a diagnosis itself, would lead to lot of reduction in the stress which the family is going through, the confusion. These are solved. And one more biggest challenge is in India, we think that rare disease is somebody else's problem. It's not my problem. So this is what is really making it difficult for them, leading to stigmatizing factor. So marriageability, these are the concerns where they are not really ready to discuss this open and share among their near community, so that they can get. Many times it's they don't go to seek help because they fear that the neighbors will come to know. So this is how emotionally, or this is affecting the diagnosis itself. The second one, financially, I feel is um, many times the village people, they don't even think to pay for a genetic testing. The biggest struggle is more from upper middle class, where they even ask question for even every pie with they're spending for the genetic test. The low socioeconomic people blindly trust their consultants and yes, give us some solution or a direction for this is what commonly faced in practice. So with respect to finance, I feel we have a lot of working groups across the country. Like there is one group working on a specific disease group, we have a panel for it. So like that, we should be communicating with each other, so that if I have a child whom I'm suspecting lysosomal storage disease, I'll send to this group who can offer me for a reduced cost. In that way, CCMB, CDFD, they're all helping us a lot, because the cost wise, we can tell the community, patient communities, that yes, you can do this test at this cost. So many more such disease, and I don't think cost would for testing would be burden now, because the cost has come down. What I saw 50-60,000 earlier has come down to 7-8,000 for NGS now. So financially, I don't think, until unless when we have inconclusive diagnosis, or there are variants which we are not able to, but that may not be a total burden compared to a bigger, larger group which we are thinking. And the next, logistic struggle. Yes, we spoke about center of excellence. How many in Karnataka, because it's such a big state, are able to reach Bangalore, Indira Gandhi Hospital, wait for 5 days, lose their hope, and come back? If there is an IEM child who is metabolically decompensated and is reaching the hospital, we have lost lives in ambulance itself. So I would see that during this is to develop a proper referral pathways for which we need a framework. Let's have a hub and spoke model. We are not taking anything away from center of competences, but let them develop a different level. For example, we have tried and tested a very small pilot where we have tried to educate the primary healthcare officers district up to district level. All PHCs officer we have trained in Mysore, Chamarajnagara, when to refer. That's it. Few pointers when to refer. They're really, I was so surprised to see the enthusiasm from their end. So if such a, we can define ourselves what is the scope of expertise or competence which limits them. So people are ready to reach the center of competence. And also if a Down's child is there, not every time he has to go to a higher center for the physiotherapy. We can create a local system where they will get the child development clinic or kind of supportive, because as rightly mentioned by earlier experts, that many of them, very small percentage is treatable. We need supportive care. The supportive care is deprived because of the distance. So even 30 kilometer, we have to think of out of pocket expenditure, loss of wages, loss of schooling for the other sibling. Both the parents have to come. So I think hub and spoke model has to be well defined, where we defined at each level what is to be delivered, so that finally center of competence is accountable for all. So it is the time when these center of excellence have to come up for their own geographical location, how this has to percolate into the grassroots level so that this can be developed, and there could be some navigator system so that everything is accountable and the maximum benefit reaches these beneficiaries.
Right, right. So I would like to ask Ms. Arushi that with cystic fibrosis still widely underdiagnosed in India and access to advanced therapies remaining limited, a crucial question emerges: how can Indian CDMO step in to develop localized, cost-effective formulations that truly meet the needs of these underserved patient communities?
Yeah. Yeah. So since we were talking about the economic burden of, patients and families with rare diseases, cystic fibrosis is, one example wherein the economic burden is huge. India accounts for about 15% of the global cystic fibrosis incidences in the world. There are about 40,000 patients with 3,600 new cases every year, and this is a probable number wherein we are not sure of the exact statistics because newborn screening is not standard, and many cases are labeled as recurrent pneumonia. So there's a major access to treatment gap. The treatment is imported, the cost ranging between 15 to 30 lakhs per month or more, which makes them out of reach for practically most families in the country. Most advanced therapies are imported and they are not manufactured locally. So, what we can do as CDMOs is we can see how the API is manufactured locally, how the formulation is manufactured locally, and hence the cost is which is 15 to 30 lakhs, is significantly minimized and then made accessible to these patients, reducing the economic burden. So we have worked on the product on Ifacaptor, and we have the first to submit the dossier in the country, and we target to reduce the price, the therapy treatment by it 1/10 of the
And
current
yeah.
treatment price. So I think this is just an example, but how we can reduce the economic burden of the families is by looking at specific rare diseases in which we need to prioritize as the pharma ecosystem to kind of manufacture the API and formulation in the country. And we also need cooperation and data from the central of excellence, from the policy formulators, so to help us and to identify which ones to choose first. We have already identified about 15 diseases and drugs which we're all almost through with working on. So, Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one more thing from you, Ms. Arushi, that if you have to change one thing in the whole ecosystem, what would it that?
Um, I think awareness and diagnosis to start with. Um, because if there is awareness, I think we can achieve a lot of these objectives that we're trying to as a group.
Right, right. And Ms. Sangeeta, from advocacy point of view, what would you like to inculcate in our Indian ecosystem for the rare disease patients? Sangeeta, please.
Point of view, it will be very, very important for, the pillars of this whole rare diseases ecosystem, which is the clinicians first who bring the scientific knowledge to the table, the policy holders, the government, which brings the, a desired structure which is needed to put things in place in terms of understanding. I personally believe that the patient, not because I run a patient organization, but I personally believe that, look, patient advocacy organizations have to get the stronger seat at the table, because we are the ones, as very, very, very nicely and passionately articulated by Dr. Deepa, about, we have lived experience of the people. For the last 13 years, since the time I'm associated, I have, attended every race for seven, every rare disease day. And for that, if the patients who come, they come with a lot of hope. They come with immense hope. We understand the kind of drudgery that they're going through, the kind of hope that they have from the judiciary, from the regulators, and we understand what they really need in the reality, and not as sitting at 20-degree and 40-degree, because we really know what is happening with their social life, what is happening their economic life or financial life, what is happening their emotional life. I think if we come to the table, it's we would bring in a much passionate, purposeful, and impactful, thought to the table, which can only help patients and also make policy in such a way that, look, it is not esoteric, it is not only putting a burden on the government, but it is more realistic in terms of its implementation at every level, because the nprd is a good step, but is that enough? You give 50 lakh, and one time, yeah, day before yesterday, I met a patient of SMA. Okay, person got the treatment from an ex company, and today there is no treatment, and the child has started showing the symptoms back. Imagine the plight of a mother and a father, both doctors. What happens to people like them? So I think it's very, very important that the policymakers understand this. So these three things come together. I'm sure we can shape a much better, much more impactful life for the patients of rare diseases. We have come a long way, but I'm sure we can do much, much better than what we have done till today.
Right, right. And Dr. Charu, what according to you, how can we reduce the burden, whether it's funding or what change would you like?
Yeah, I think we want to make sure that patients get the treatment that is available. They get access to the treatment. They get access to the diagnosis. And I think apart from, of course, there's a policy, and the policy has had. Or we also have the website or the government, the crowdfunding. I think if the crowdfunding can be made more active, and we could get support from corporates, from CSRs to increase the funding for these patients. And then it's on the government website. We know that it's been going for the right to the right patients. We hopefully want them to have that kind of fund, so that we don't, I mean, no patient is left untreated due to the lack of funds. Patient advocacy groups are indeed, as Sangeeta mentioned, they're the ones who can raise awareness, one, even among the common public, so that when there are crowdfunding or such kind of, or CSRs or private public partnerships that would contribute towards these treatments, it would be possible, if there is more awareness. So mega fund private public partnerships, like the example of MIT Sloan's Rare Disease Fund Act. They have, they raise funds to invest in research as well as treatment of rare patients. Philanthropy is for the rare diseases. I think that is also something that we should create awareness about, so that bigger corporates can then step into this part of treatment and provide some solace in this, for our patients. Another thing which I strongly feel, having worked into research, is, participation in clinical trials. If we could increase the number, when we're doing global clinical trials for any rare disease, it's very difficult to find patients. They're ready to go to any country to get the patients, or even get the patients to the site. Or nowadays, because of the virtual trials, we can have that kind of accessibility to have our patients participate in global clinical trials. So specifically for those diseases for which there is no treatment yet, which we are talking almost 90% of the rare diseases, having the opportunity to participate into a clinical trial early on can really be a breakthrough for such patients. And so increasing the opportunities for participating into clinical trials, and there is where I think the registries will be important, because for the sponsor companies to allow those kind of participation, they would want to see whether we have the patient pool available, we have the diagnostic facilities, we have the cold chain facilities. So having that kind of um, um, registry and details available for sponsor companies could be also a very good breakthrough for our patients. And as Arushi mentioned, having the low cost drugs in form of generics, like we had in 2023, some drugs approved, which really improved the cost benefit to the patients. I think bringing more such cost effective drugs in India, or indigenously manufactured, would be a um, good contribution towards the treatment of our rare patients.
And since you have touched various generic medicine, I would like to ask Ms. Arushi that although we have discussed about cystic fibrosis, what is your take on rare epilepsies, like where treatment depends on, again, precision, stability, and patient-friendly delivery? So how can we make these more available to the patients and more accessible? And what does CDMO play part in this?
Yeah, thank you. Even though we have many anti-seizure medicines available, they still are not enough for a large group of patients, especially pediatric patients or children with severe and rare epilepsies. And the reality is that 80 to 90% of these children continue to have seizures, translated into their adulthood, even after trying multiple standard therapies available. So what we have done, that we can play with innovation of the drug. We can see how the drug can be taste masked, or how we can do accurate micro dosing, and or make an oral solution that can be used by pediatric patients as well as adult use, and which actually address the precise dosing that is required with the changing weight of the child and then the adult. So the product that we developed, the CBD oral solution, um, is to be taken as per the weight of the patient. It is a synthetic version. It is non-habit forming. It is again saves about 85% of the cost of the family as compared to the imported drug that was the innovator drug from Europe. So yeah, I mean, again, it is also about how we, as the pharma ecosystem comes together and works on, making in India the API and the formulation. And secondly, how are we innovating and making the drug suitable for better suited for the patient and better suited for the Indian climate.
Right, right. So last take from Dr. Deepa, that since you must have come across many rare disease patients, and you have rightly mentioned that it's an emotional burden for the family as well as for the patient. So, what is one change that you would like to be there immediately in the system to make the biggest impact for the daily lives of these rare disease patients?
Yeah, I think I resonate the same thing again. It is awareness. Awareness, whether it is at the health system level or at the community level or at the grassroots level. But I would always prefer a bottom up approach. This is one thing, and also developing a care pathways. It should change from privilege based care to the people based access. So if that happens, I think that's the only thing which I would envision in the near future. If this one step is taken, I think the rest all will happen through a lot of enthusiastic minds which have come together to work for the cause. So this is a simple message which I would like to bring it to the audience.
Right. So, on that note, I think we are here for creating the awareness only. And since we know that rare disease, although it is called rare, it's not so rare. It's only the symptoms are vague and we are not able to catch it early. We have to diagnose. Maybe the national registry can help us to pick up the patterns. And, we need funding, although national policy for rare disease is in place. But how it is reaching the beneficiaries, that is what is we have to look into. And I think more forums and more people and experts coming on such forums and sharing their insights would definitely help to create that ecosystem which is required in India. So with that note, I thank you all for joining us today in this important discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you, everybody.